Hey, Victoria, thanks for chatting today. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about this piece we've been working on, Ocean and to Wire, which is a title I love, by the way. Um, so maybe just for all of us who are watching and for our memories later when we come back to this, could you say a little bit about maybe, sort of where we are in the process of putting the piece together? Would you say it's done, right? You would say it's finished pretty much, or I don't know. How are you thinking about it?
Um, I think that's a really good question. Is it done? Is it ever done? I
Right.
remember, was it like, I think was it Julia who was like, oh, I have this, oh no, I think it was you, sorry, like, I had this ribbon, is it too late? And I was like, what do you mean, is it too late? Of course it's fine. Um, I think, um, I think it's pretty much done to the extent that I could do it before working with musicians and working with you. And since this is like so specifically for Yarn Wire, it was really important to me to like get your input on different sounds, on like certain motions, how your bodies and gestures like feel doing certain sounds.
Hmm.
So like kind of, it's mostly done. I mean, it's in progress. Close enough. I mean, do you feel like it's more or less done? Like,
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is it's changed a little bit since we first looked at or I guess what was the first draft, but yeah, I agree absolutely. It's like whenever we work with anyone, it's always that question of, how, I mean, I remember playing pieces even years after the premiere, excuse me, and composers are still making changes at that point. So, I think it's a it's a very flexible timeline, so to speak. Yeah.
with my music, there are a lot of things that are up to the discretion of the performers. So like, timing and stuff like that. Um, this doesn't really apply because we're not doing lots of things with like things. Okay, for example, like with wind players, right? A question that comes up a lot for them is like, when am I allowed to breathe? Even though, like, very specifically in the technique notes or program notes, or sorry, performance notes, I'll say like you can breathe whenever you want. Like that's kind of part of this as well. So um, I think it is a question about a tax. Like, should you like rearticulate each word or each syllable? And maybe we can play around with that in rehearsal. It's definitely really helpful to have to work with ensemble that's flexible about details because like
Mhm.
you kind of make the best educated guess you can with the score. And I don't know about other people, but for me, it's just like I'm kind of like alone with paper in my room, like staring at like symbols and like hearing, like imagining things in my head. Like it's not real until it is actually real and like um, with the people who are going to be making those sounds.
You're thinking the bottom would also be suspended, right? And because if it's suspended like this, you get that kind of laser sound with that, and that's what you're looking for, as opposed to if it's on a surface, you won't get as much laser sound. You'll just get hitting the table, right? As opposed to, I don't know if you can hear it, but
Also put a piece of paper at the bottom, so
it could amplify
like
that.
something light and put the table. Um, I'm not sure really with the mic for that actually. Interesting. With mic in the middle. Oh,
Yeah. Well, the paper fell off, but it sounded okay.
One of the things that I am loving and finding really cool about this piece is all of the sort of visual, as well as handmade or sort of non-traditional instruments that you've either created or adapted or brought in. And so I guess just, sort of knowing your work from before a little bit, but also for anyone who maybe isn't so familiar with your work, where would you say those elements fit in just sort of in the context of your work in general? I mean, are there things that come back again and again from other pieces, or are you taking particular risks in this piece? What do you think?
I think there are some things that I'm definitely still working on. So sustained sounds, there's a lot of that. Uh, there's only one section with the bowed piano, though. I tried to keep it to a minimum. It's had to become a thing, like, for me. I just didn't. I know, first of all, it's like really taxing. So, it's not that like you can't do it because you have, but it's just being mindful about like what physical demands we're asking people to do. I think the objects that I've tried to make, that's kind of new. It came about from a kind of a long process. I didn't start out thinking I was going to make stuff out of cardboard. Um, Honestly, like I collected a lot of my recycled materials and they were just piling up and I wanted to do something with them and I like making crafts. So I decided to like try and make some hourglasses. I also started folding paper stars, like paper origami stars, to kind of like work on like anxiety stuff like in the fall. And just I had this jar of stars and that started this whole hourglass thing, or kind of mechanical machine idea that's in this piece. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to make an hourglass that would let the stars fall at a relatively regular rate. But that was basically like the preliminary idea. I wanted to make an hourglass with these origami paper stars, and that turned into all these other things. And then that also fed into the idea of this piece being about sort of processes and time and communication and sort of human impulse that creates processes or like starts processes in motion. So the handmade instruments are a new thing. We'll see how that works out. It was really just sort of a practical thing too, because you kind of can't just like flip over a rain stick and let it do its thing for a certain amount of time.
They're really finicky. They're hard to play. I never realized that until I tried.
You have to like turn it and like,
Yeah.
yeah, we were talking the other day, like there's a technique for everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to like come up with a solution that was relatively low maintenance, but would last for longer than the impulse needed to start it. So that's hence the slinky. The slinky has been a thing for me, I think, for a little while, but I'm excited to hear it like with the bass drum. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that's going to sound really great.
I think what I'm going to do is either build a little like cardboard platform to put a contact mic under.
Yeah.
So it's like here. Or just directly against the wood if it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah. What does it sound like just acoustically?
So Russell and Sai, or whoever is free, might have to just like tap it.
Yeah.
If it gets stuck.
Encourage it.
Yeah, basically.
The idea behind the machines is that like there's always going to be a consistent like mechanical sound throughout basically throughout the whole piece. So we have the vibraphone with its motor on, with
Yep.
the bag hitting the resonator. Is there a word for that, by the way? The flippy thing that creates the vibrato.
Motor?
But the motor is
The fans.
the fans. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the fans with the bag. So
And is it just over all of the tubes, the bag?
it's just over like the side. I mean, it's I have a bag that I can bring. It's pretty small.
Okay.
It'll just be over like part of it.
So we're not playing anything on the instrument. We're just letting the motor come in contact with the bag, right? And that's the sound you want.
There's a couple of pitches, I think, right?
In the last section, there are a couple pitches on the vibraphone, but
Okay.
basically it's there as its function as a motor as well as
Right. Okay.
So like that's the idea behind the vibraphone, the record player. When it because you just hear something with the rotating essentially, constantly rotating. Something with the slinky. which is, I was thinking the hourglasses are, I think, more related because you have to them.
I have to say, I also love the turntable.
Oh, yeah.
With the sort of, uh, are those embroidery hoops that you've used on
Yeah,
the, yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Um, it's such a fantastic sound, and it also, it's like I said, it's visually so engaging. So I think that's going to be a really important part of this piece, is that audiences in whatever format get to experience the visual element.
And then if you take off the wrapper, and I'm just keeping the little like case for the needle on. And that's what it sounds like.
So the wave machine is like this sort of like elementary school science class project, which I don't know if I wasn't familiar with this growing up, but it's basically a model that you can make to demonstrate like how a wave moves across the thing. So it's a piece of tape with a bunch of like kebab sticks, stuck on the tape, and then you hold it tight at the top, and then if you hit one side, the sticks kind of ripple across the length of the thing. I linked to a video that shows it. Um, so the wave machines, similar to the slinky, is like you activate the motion of this object that will move on its own based on that first impulse that you set in motion for like a fixed amount of time because of the energy of the impulse. And that's kind of like a midpoint between something like the vibraphone, which will just keep going until you turn it off, and then your actual playing, as humans. Since you do have to activate the machines, and it's actually pretty important that they're analog machines and not like computer or stuff like that. So it's that your choice to activate this machine sets up a process that exists for a certain amount of time that then you again choose to activate.
We're starting with documentation instead of a live premiere, which is sort of the inverse of what often happens. So I don't know, are there things that you're hoping we can get out of this kind of working process? Like, are there any benefits maybe to working this way that you can think of?
I think it's a really good question. And I'm sure my answer to this is going to change over time since I think a lot of people, like a lot of things right now, are documentation first just because of necessity. I think the first thing that this makes me think of is like how documentation is often seen as the permanent record of a piece. And now that we have such easy access, or most of us have such easy access to like video and audio recording, that gives a whole other layer of like information and insight into what the piece is or could be, or one form that it could take. But it also, I think, one thing that'd be really interesting to see is how that documentation like creates more expectations for that particular piece. I was actually just looking after a rehearsal today for my day job, and it was this piece by Valentin Silvestrov from like the 70s. And there's an instruction in the score that asks the violinist to strike a match and blow out the match. And so this was a problem because in the venue we couldn't have open flame, which is fine. Because we figured it out, didn't have to actually like get there. But the question came up, like, did she have to blow out the match, or could she like shake it out, like just pantomime it like this? Because also everyone was wearing masks. I think like that level of specificity in documentation, like the score, which also doubles as instructions, that'll be really interesting. I think later on when we go from documentation to concert, like how much we feel like we have to stick with the version that's in the video versus it's kind of nice. It's sort of in a way less pressure because I'm anticipating changes between documentation and the concert or the next version of it. And in general, I'm really pro multiple like interpretations or versions of little details in my stuff. Um, so I guess the short answer to your question is I'm not sure, but I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I think that's going to be actually, I mean, that's something I'm really curious about too, is and having we've done one piece like that so far where we documented and recorded uh and we haven't given a live premiere yet. And so both for, eventually maybe even documenting it again, like even since that first recording, like we've kind of worked on and rehearsed the piece a little bit and it's already changed again. And so I'm going to be really, it's really interesting to work this way actually. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, even though I'm really itchy for the live performance for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
there's energy live that's really hard to replicate otherwise. Yeah, I think on stage it would be really nice to have um, the location of the amplified objects like where they actually are instead
Yep.
of diffused.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially if we are doing the noise as part of the like as part of the keyboard sounds, you know.
Yep.
So if that noise is stereo, then the amplification station should probably be its own thing. But
Yep.
that's also different, if you're watching it on stage as opposed to
Right.
computer.
Yeah, I think that'll be yeah.
I have one more question, which is, let's say somebody is like listening to us chat about your piece. What is sort of maybe one thing, or if you can think of one thing you would want an audience member or a listener to know about your piece, maybe that we haven't talked about yet?
I think I'd like them to know that they don't have to pay really close attention the whole time, and that paying attention to what catches their attention is part of the piece. So, not a whole lot. In some ways, not a whole lot happens in the piece, but in a lot of other ways, like a lot is happening. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say.
I like that, sort of almost like allowing yourself to slip in and out of consciousness a little bit.
Yeah. Like you don't have to know how to listen to this. If you want to pay attention to all the details, like great. If you want to just sort of zone out, that's your right. It's not. So yeah.
Nice. Cool. I like that a lot. Well, I'm really, really looking forward to continuing to work on your piece and to recording it soon. And I definitely can't wait to share it with all the people of the world. So thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.